Hey there, ready for a deep dive? Today we're exploring TanStack Router and something called navigation blocking. Like when you're filling out a big online form and you accidentally close the tab, it's all about making sure you don't lose all your work in those oops moments.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge for developers making sure user data is protected without having tons of pop-ups every time you click something. TanStack Router gives developers a way to strike that balance, and it's got a lot of flexibility built in.
Okay, I'm getting the idea, but what exactly is navigation blocking? Can we break that down a bit?
Imagine you're on a website, and you're filling out this super important form, maybe a job application or something. Without navigation blocking, you could lose all your progress by accidentally clicking the back button or hitting the wrong link. TanStack Router steps in to prevent that from happening.
So it's kind of like a safety net for those times when you make a mistake. But wait, doesn't the browser already have something like that? Like I've seen those pop-up boxes asking if I'm sure I want to leave a page.
You're right. There's a built-in browser feature called the before unload event. That's what triggers that confirmation box. What's cool about TanStack Router is it builds upon that basic feature and gives developers much more control over how it works.
Interesting. So it's not just about blocking navigation completely. It's about making it smarter and more customizable,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. TanStack Router lets developers customize the messages people see, the conditions that trigger the blocking, and even what those prompts look like. It can be a simple "Are you sure?" message or a totally unique design that fits right in with the website.
So it could be something more subtle and visually appealing than a generic pop-up. That makes a lot of sense. But what exactly makes this blocking happen? Is it anytime someone tries to leave a page, or is it more specific than that?
It's not always active. TanStack Router is context aware. Developers can set it up so the blocking only kicks in when there's a real risk of losing data. Like if you've started filling out a form but haven't submitted it, that's when the blocking might come into play.
So it's smart and prevents data loss without bombarding people with unnecessary prompts.
I like that. Now, I've heard there are different ways to implement this in TanStack Router, something about hooks and components.
You're right. TanStack Router gives developers two main approaches, a hook called useBlocker and a component called block. You choose the method that works best for how your application is built and structured, which makes development easier.
Okay, I'm not a coder, so can you break that down for me a bit? What's the difference between those two approaches?
Think of it this way. The useBlocker hook is all about logic and code. It's perfect when you want the blocking to depend on a specific condition, like whether a form has been changed or not.
So it's working behind the scenes based on what's happening in the app.
Got it. What about that block component?
The block component is more visual. Imagine you have a form with multiple steps. You actually wrap this component around those steps to make sure users don't skip ahead or lose their progress.
That makes sense. So developers can choose which approach works best for different situations. But I'm thinking about all this blocking, and it sounds great for preventing data loss. But are there times when it might not be the best solution? What if a website is constantly autosaving your progress? Wouldn't blocking get annoying then?
You're spot on. You've hit a really important concept in web design, finding that balance. If a website is auto-saving your work, you wouldn't need constant blocking. That would be overkill. Developers need to think carefully about when and how they use this feature.
So it's not just about having the technical ability, it's about using it wisely and in a way that actually makes sense for the person using the website. I'm curious about something else. How does TanStack Router handle those times when you have to wait for something to happen before you can navigate away? Like when you hit submit on a form and it needs to save the data.
You're talking about asynchronous actions. Think of it like this. You hit submit, and that data needs to travel somewhere, to a server, to get saved. That takes time, even if it's just a fraction of a second. We don't want the user to navigate away before that saving process is finished.
Right, that would be a disaster if they lost all their information. So how does TanStack Router make sure that doesn't happen?
It's designed to handle those situations gracefully. It uses some programming techniques called promises and async await to make sure that navigation is only blocked until those necessary actions are complete. It's like saying, hold on a sec, we just need to make sure this important task is done before you go anywhere.
That's fascinating. It sounds like a lot of thought goes into making sure things run smoothly behind the scenes. I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the user experience. I get how this technical stuff is great for developers, but how does it actually feel for the person using the website? Doesn't all this blocking get frustrating sometimes?
It definitely can, especially if it's not done well. Too many prompts, confusing messages, or blocking that happens at the wrong time, that can lead to a frustrating experience. That's why developers need to be really careful about how they implement navigation blocking.
Okay, so it sounds like custom messages, smart blocking conditions, and a smooth user experience are all key. But are there any situations where this navigation blocking might cross a line? Like, is there a risk of developers using it to basically trap users on a page?
That's a really important point. Navigation blocking is a useful tool, but it's crucial to use it responsibly and ethically. We don't want to create a web where people feel trapped or like they can't move around freely.
Right, the goal is to prevent accidental data loss and make the user experience better, not to restrict people. It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here: technical details, user experience, even ethical considerations. What's next?
Now that we've got the basics down, let's look at some real-world examples of how TanStack Router's navigation blocking is being used. I think that will help bring this all to life.
Sounds good to me. Let's see how developers are putting these concepts into practice.
All right, so let's jump into some real-world examples. One of the most common places you'll see navigation blocking is with online forms. You know those times when you've spent like forever typing out this long message and you almost lose it all because you accidentally click the wrong thing?
Oh, yeah, I've totally been there. It's the worst. So how does TanStack Router help in those situations?
Well, I was reading this blog post by a developer, and they were using TanStack Router to stop data loss in a contact form. They were using the use blocker hook that we talked about, combined with that built-in browser thing, the before unload event.
Oh, okay, so like a double layer of protection, one for like moving around within the website, and then another for when you accidentally close the tab or the whole window.
You got it. It's a really clever way to make sure users don't lose their work no matter what. And what I thought was really neat, this developer set it up so the blocking only happened if the form was actually changed.
So if you haven't typed anything yet, or you already hit submit, you can navigate around without any interruptions. That makes sense. But what about those more like complex forms? Like imagine you're filling out a multi-step application, something with a ton of fields. Can TanStack Router handle that?
Totally. I found this article that was all about using TanStack Router for those super detailed situations. It talked about how developers can use something called middleware and hooks to create these dynamic prompts that change based on what the user's doing.
Okay, now you're losing me a bit. Can you give me like a real-world example of how that would look?
Sure. Imagine you're on a form that has like different sections, right? Let's say you have to fill out your personal info before moving on to shipping details. With TanStack Router, a developer could set it up to give you specific prompts based on what section you're on.
Ah, so instead of that generic, "Are you sure you want to leave?"
Yeah.
message, it would be more like, "Hey, you haven't finished this section yet. Are you sure you want to go somewhere else?"
Exactly. It's like guiding the user through the process and making sure they don't miss anything important or, lose any of the info they already entered.
That's cool. Thinking about all these different prompts and conditions is making my head spin a bit. I can't imagine how developers keep track of all that. Are there, like, any tips for managing all that complexity?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a lot to juggle. The article I mentioned had a few suggestions. One was to create these like reusable functions. So instead of writing the same code over and over, you can just call this one function whenever you need it.
So it's like a shortcut, keeps things organized and saves time. What else do they recommend?
Another one was to use, let me think, the use effect hook. It basically lets the app keep an eye on what's happening and adjust the prompts automatically based on what the user's doing.
So it's like this smart system that's always running in the background, making sure everything runs smoothly. That's impressive.
Mm.
With all this tech stuff, I keep thinking about the user experience. How do we make sure all this complexity doesn't end up confusing or frustrating for the people actually using the app?
You're right, it's got to be user-friendly. Luckily, the developers of TanStack Router have really thought about the user experience. They actually recommend moving away from those standard browser pop-up boxes and creating custom dialogues that fit the app.
So instead of that basic confirm navigation box, you could have something that looks nicer and matches the app's design.
Exactly. It's all about making those prompts feel like they belong there, instead of being these weird interruptions. And those custom dialogues can also be more informative, Like, instead of just a generic, "Are you sure?" it could actually explain why navigation is being blocked.
Right, so instead of just being told no, you get a helpful explanation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like night and day. And it's not just about the words either. The TanStack Router documentation also talks about how important it is to make these dialogues accessible for everyone, regardless of their abilities.
Of course. What does that mean exactly?
Well, things like making sure people who can't use a mouse can still interact with the dialogues using their keyboard, or making sure they work with screen readers for people who are visually impaired, and just making sure people don't get lost or confused when these dialogues pop up.
Wow, this is making me realize how much thought goes into something as simple as a navigation prompt. It's not just about preventing data loss, it's about making the whole experience better for everyone.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to using this feature responsibly. The goal is to stop people from accidentally losing their work, but also to respect their freedom to move around the web.
That's a really good point. It's like, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Developers have a lot of power with these tools, so it's important to use them in a way that's good for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So I think we've covered a lot. From the tech stuff to the user experience and even some ethical stuff, it's clear that navigation blocking can be super helpful, but it needs to be implemented carefully.
We've talked a lot about articles and blog posts, but I'd love to see this in action. You mentioned a YouTube video earlier, and I think seeing it visually would really help me understand.
Oh yeah, we've got that video. Why don't we dive into that now and see how this all comes together?
Perfect. Let's do it. Okay, I'm ready to see this in action.
Yeah.
Definitely learn best when I can actually see how things work. What's this video all about?
So this video is from a developer named Leonardo, and he's awesome at explaining stuff. He breaks down TanStack Router's navigation blocking features in a way that's easy to follow,
Mm.
and the visuals are really good too. Plus, it's always cool to hear from other developers, people who are using this stuff in their real projects.
Oh, totally. I love seeing real-world examples. So what does Leonardo focus on in the video?
Well, he shows two ways to use the use blocker hook. The first one he calls the blocker function approach. It's all about creating those custom messages we talked about earlier instead of using that generic one.
Right, right. Those custom confirmation messages
Yeah.
tailored to the specific situation.
Exactly. He basically shows how you can write a little bit of code to create a custom message when someone tries to leave the page. Like, if you're on an online store, it could say something like, hey, you've got unsaved changes in your cart. Are you sure you want to leave?
Okay, that makes a lot more sense than just a boring warning. But what if someone just ignores that custom message and closes the tab anyway? Does the blocking still work?
Yeah, Leonardo covers that. He points out that in those cases, the browser takes over and you get that standard warning message, from that before unload event we were talking about.
So even if you try to skip past the custom message, the browser is still there as backup. That's good to know. You said there was another way to use the use blocker hook. What was that?
Right. The second way he shows is all about creating custom UI for the navigation blocking. That's where things get really interesting, especially for design.
Ooh, custom UI. So instead of those basic pop-ups, you can create something that looks really nice.
Yep. Instead of using those standard browser dialogues, you can design your own that fit in with your website. Like a modal window that slides in or a little notification bar at the top. There's a lot you can do.
I love that. It's like you're taking something that could be annoying and making it more elegant. How does that custom UI actually work? Does the use blocker hook give you like special tools for that?
It does, yeah. The hook gives you a few functions to play with. One is called proceed, and you can use that to, allow navigation. Like you could attach that to a button that says, yes, I'm sure, in your custom dialog.
So that gives the user a way to confirm that they really do want to leave the page, even though they might have unsaved changes. What about if they want to stay on the page?
Well, there's another function called reset. You can use that to cancel the navigation. So, like, you could hook that up to a no take me back button or something.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It gives the user control. But how does the app know when to actually show this custom UI?
Right, good question. There's another part of the use blocker hook. It gives you back a value called status, and that tells you if navigation is currently blocked or not.
So you use that status to decide whether to show the custom UI or not. If it's blocked, show the UI. If not, keep it hidden. Got it.
Exactly. It's like you only show the custom stuff when you actually need it, which makes the experience much smoother. Leonardo even shows how to use this custom UI with a modal component, which makes it look really nice and integrated.
This is so cool. It's amazing how much work has gone into this feature. It's more than just a little pop-up. It's a whole system for controlling the user experience.
Yeah, I know. It's both powerful and flexible, but they've also made it easy to use.
And thanks to people like Leonardo making these videos, we can all understand this stuff better, even if we don't write code ourselves.
Totally. I think that's what makes these deep dives so great. It's all about, like, taking complex tech and making it more accessible.
Well, I feel like I learned a ton about TanStack Router and this whole navigation blocking thing. It's been
Yeah.
fascinating to see how the tech works, but also all the design stuff and even the ethical consideration.
Me too. It
Yeah,
really shows how tech is always evolving, and we all need to keep learning and adapting.
definitely. So, as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the main thing you hope people take away from this?
I think the big takeaway is this. Navigation blocking is really useful, but it's just a tool. It's up to developers to use it the right way, ethically.
Yeah.
The whole point is to improve the user experience, not to control what people do online.
That's a great point. Technology should empower people, not hold them back.
Absolutely. And I think that about wraps up this deep dive.
Awesome. Until next time, keep exploring and learning. There's always something new to discover in the world of tech.